Hi there, here's a tutorial on setting up the XT-4 camera for the Penguin time-lapse systems. So before we get into the specifics of the menu, let's have a bit of a look around the outside. So on the left hand side here we've got a selector for different type of shot selection. So S is for single, that's what we want, and on the right hand side still is what we want as well, so not doing movies. And on the top here we've got a few different dials. At the bottom we've got our ISO selector, so that just rotates around. We want to go for A for auto, and then we've got a lock button at the top to lock it into place. Same with our shutter speed. We can rotate that around to whatever shutter speed we want, but we want it to be automatic, so A for auto and then locked in place. And then we've also got exposure compensation. It's usually pretty good at that, so we'll just leave it at 0. Then another pretty critical thing is setting up what type of focus we're using. So there's a selector on the front of our camera here, and that dials around. We've got M for manual, C for continuous, and S for single. We want it on M for manual, so fully manual focus is what we're going to go for. Then on the big lens itself, we've got a few selectors. We want it on its full range, so just select that option. Then below that is our f-stop selection. Auto should be okay, but if you're having trouble with depth of field, we might have to go to the next switch down. And then the bottom option is optical image stabilization. Should be fine having that on. Then we want to have our lens cover off when we're ready to start taking photos. Just give it a quick check, make sure there's not too much crud on there. Our first ring is our focus ring. The next big ring is our zoom, and you'll see that there's a lock selector on there. That's pretty much useless. It only locks it in place for the minimum, so don't rely on that too much. And then the last ring there is for the f-stop adjustment, if you're going to use that, but we'll probably stick with auto. At this end we've got the hatch where the memory cards are, and then up on the top of our camera we've got a little view mode button. We'll be working with that a little bit to change our options of what we're seeing, either the LCD or the electronic viewfinder. Okay, now we can switch it on. At the moment we've got our internal battery in, so that's powering things at the moment. And then we've got our LCD showing us the status of everything, including the number of photos we've got available, shutter speed, f-stop, ISO, and battery voltage. When you're using the external battery, it's likely that that will be a bit lower. To see an existing image, we can just push our playback button. Nothing there at the moment. And then to get back to our live view, we just push the shutter button. Okay, let's dive into that menu. Let's make sure we're taking our maximum resolution possible, so that's our top value there. And next is the compression, so we're going to go on fine. We want good quality images. We're not going to be recording in RAW, so we can ignore that. Also not recording any film, so we can ignore that as well. Most of this other stuff is for film stuff. Now we're into white balance. Auto is usually good. Dynamic range, most of these are fine. 200's probably the best option, but any of those are pretty much okay. Most of the rest of the stuff we won't need to worry about. Color correction is usually really good on this, so unless you've got something specific you need, just having it that at 0 is fine. We are going to be using high ISOs when it's dark, so we do want some noise reduction on there. So middle of the range is usually fine. We are going to be using long exposures, so we have that long exposure noise reduction on. I'm not too sure what this one is, but the default usually seems to be fine, so I'll leave that. We're not going to play too much with the different film simulations and stuff, so we'll just skip that and leave that all to default. Most of this focusing stuff is about autofocus. There's a whole lot you can tweak with autofocus, but since we're using manual focus, we can not worry about most of this stuff, so just leave it on default. Manual focus assist is the thing that you might want to play with. So when you're doing some manual focus, there's a few different options as to how it displays things when you're trying to get that focus right. We'll just stick it with the standard option at the moment. And then we're back into other autofocus settings, so we can just leave all of those as defaults. This one is mostly about how fast you want to focus things, so that's for high speed action, so we don't need to worry about that too much. Drive settings, we're just going to be on single shot drive, so that S setting, so we don't need to worry about these too much. But these are other options you would have if you were on different mode. Again, sports, we're not trying to capture fast stuff, so we don't need to worry about that too much. Self timer, that's if you want to push the button, wait a little bit before it actually takes the photo. We're probably not going to use that, so we'll leave that off for the moment. And then our next one down is whether or not it remembers that, so that's fine, we can leave that off. The one we are going to use a lot is interval timer shooting, so we'll come back to that and we'll spend a bit of time diving into that. And we want to have the next one off, so that's the interval timer smoothing, so we definitely want that one off. Shutter type, so you can either have an electronic shutter or a manual shutter, mechanical shutter, so we're going to go for electronic, so we want it on ES. That's going to reduce the amount of movement inside the camera, reduce wear on it, and the only reason we wouldn't have that is if we had fast motion, which we don't, so ES is what we want. Image stabilization, we want that when it's only shooting, again to keep power down a bit. The ISO mode, it doesn't matter which number we choose here, but it is important what the settings are on that number. So we want our max sensitivity up to full, and our shutter speed down to auto, so that gives us the best possible chance of getting good images in low light settings. So we're hoping to get something over winter. Multi-exposure, we're not going to be doing multi-exposures, so we don't need to worry about that. Wireless communication, there's a whole section on that later on, we'll dive into that, but mostly won't need it. Not using flash either, so we can just take those ones. Whole lot more we can tweak here. We can format the cards, they should be fine, shouldn't need to. Date and time, it's worthwhile checking to see the date and time are set correctly, and you can adjust them there. Time difference, if you go into different time zones and stuff. You can set up custom menus, but we won't bother doing that. Sensor cleaning, so this is actually the sensor giving itself a little vibration, excuse me, to knock any dust off the sensor. So at the moment that's doing that each time it turns off. Sorry, just get back to where we were there. So we were down at sensor cleaning, leave that at that. Battery age just tells you a little bit about it. We don't need to reset anything there. Most of these sound settings we're going to have turned off, again just to save a tiny bit of power, but also to not confuse the penguins, I guess. So have those down and off. But if you did have them on, you can have different shutter sounds and stuff, but and playback, we don't need to worry about that too much because we're not playing any videos back. There's a whole lot of different stuff you can configure with your screens. So the EVF, that's the electronic viewfinder, that's that bit up there that you look through with your eye. The brightness for that we can just set to auto. We're actually going to have it turned off a little bit later, and we'll dive into how to do that. But for the most part we just leave it on its default. And again, we can tweak the color and adjustment and all sorts of things. And same with our LCD, we can change the brightness of that. When you're out in the field, you might need to possibly put that up a bit with the bright light around. And again, a whole lot of other customization. So the button on the top right there is where we switch between turning our LCD off, and now we've got just our viewfinder on. And next one, we've got our viewfinder off and our LCD back on. So it toggles between a whole lot of different modes. We'll try that again later. So pretty much just leaving all this customization as is. Again, a whole lot of different configuration as to what you can have displayed on the screens and all sorts of things, but we'll just shoot through that, leave it as is. You can also do some configuration with what different buttons do in levers and dials and stuff, but we won't play with that customization too much. Shoot without lens, so this is if you've got a third-party lens on, which we don't. We've got a Fuji one on, but I do usually have that on. It's not a critical setting. Shoot without card, it's worthwhile having that off, so it gives you a warning if you don't have a card in, but you should have them in there. Focus ring, you can change the direction if you want to. Non-linear just means that it focuses a bit faster the more you turn it. And again, a bit more customization that we don't need to fiddle with. Auto power off, the settings we're going to use is it's actually going to do its own off between photos, so we won't need to worry about that. Data setting, we do want to leave it on continuous frame numbers. We're not going to save originals, so that's sort of just saving raw. We don't want to do that. We definitely want to have our card setting on sequential, so that means once card 1 is full, it's going to move on to card 2, so make sure that's definitely on sequential. Again, we're not doing any video, so it's not too worry for that. Don't just accept the defaults for those. Connection settings, it is possible to interact with this phone using an app on your, with this camera with an app on your phone using Bluetooth, but you probably won't need to do that. Various other connection options, but again, we're probably not going to be doing that. And then that's back to the start. So that's pretty much all of the settings that we've gone through. Now we want to dive back into that time-lapse setup and make sure that we've got that set up how we want it to. So on the camera symbol there, down to interval timer shooting. Okay, we're going to scroll across and choose the interval that we want. So we're going to go for 15 minutes. And that's so we can synchronize it with the weather station. And we definitely want number of times as infinite. Okay, to move to the next page. And we can change how much of a delay it is before it takes its first shot. And again, we can try and do this to synchronize it with the weather station. So maybe having it on the 15-minute interval is good. So you scroll through those until you're happy, and then you can push OK, and then it's starting its countdown timer. And then it's gone into a low power mode, so it's effectively off. It's just keeping a timer going in the background to wait to turn on, ready for taking the shot. Turns on a little bit before so it can do its auto measurements, make the adjustments, and take the photo. And then it gives you a little preview, and then it's going to shut down again, ready for the next interval. So when it's on, the only indication that you'll have is a little indicator light that you can see just at the bottom of the EFE. To turn it back on, if it's in a in that mode, turn the dial from off to on again, and then it basically resets it and all goes back to start. And then we can dive back in and make any adjustments that we want. Make sure that we've got our settings as we want them. Set it back up again, and we can also, at this stage, once we're happy it's working properly, change things. So we're turning our LCD off and also turning our EFE off. So now you can just see the indicator light, so we know it's on and it's doing its thing, and then it's gone into sleep mode. So now we don't even have that little indicator light going. so that means it's in sleep mode between shots. Okay, it's just woken back up again. We can see that little indicator light. It'll be lining up, taking its shot. And on the right hand side of the camera here, there's also another little indicator light, which I'll show you again. That pretty much, the indicator light on the right hand side only flashes as when it's actually taking the photo. So just about to wake up from another interval. There we go, it's woken up, a little indicator light flashing at the bottom of the FE, and on the right hand side we'll see flashing as it's taking the photo. And then the FE light turns off after it's done that little save and shutdown. So now it's again in power saving mode and the time lapse is continuing. So there's a few other things that we want to have a look at, so we'll just turn it back on by switching it off and back on again. Now we want to have a look at a photo just so you can sort of see how you can zoom in and make sure your focus is all good. So I'll just quickly take a photo over here, and then we can look at something with a bit more features than just that blank wall. Okay, so pushing our playback button, we see our photo, and we can use this dial to zoom in, and that gives us a little bit of a better idea of how good our focus is, and we can make adjustments from there. Now at the moment, I kind of had forgotten that I'd put it into our low power mode, and LCD is not turning on because we had that view mode turned to both of them off. So now we've gone back into the LCD mode on. Ooh, nearly. There we go. Okay, and then we can again cycle through our different modes to get things how we want. And then when we're ready to go, we're going to have them both off so we can save the most power and also reduce the chance of damage on it. When you are using the LCD, it can come out and pivots around a little bit, which is kind of good when it's down in the box. It's pretty tricky seeing it down in there, so you might have to fiddle around a bit to see those photos while you're doing the alignment side of things. It's going to be a pretty tricky process, but you'll get there, fingers crossed. Good luck. And then when we're actually ready to go, once you've got it all in the right modes and it's going, we're going to close that LCD up so it's facing the body of the camera and turn that top viewer off, and away we go. Good luck, and I hope things work out all right. One other thing to mention, the battery that we've got in there at the moment is the small self-contained one, so when you put in the other one, you may get a lower than full charge. Also, if you need to take off the extension, there's a button on the side, you push that and rotate the lens. Make sure you're not getting any crud inside there, and there's an extension tube that you take off the big lens, and then you can connect that big lens back on. So this is if you needed a wider field of view, if it was too much zoom. So to connect the lens back up, line up the orange dots, rotate back into place until you hear a nice happy click sound. So that's if you need to adjust it. Good luck!